Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a NASCAR driver, he was the NASCAR driver. With a stare as sharp as the front bumper of his number 3 Chevrolet and a driving style that made rivals flinch, he was nicknamed the Intimidator, and he earned it every single lap. Over 26 seasons, he tore through the Winston Cup Series with a ferocity that redefined the sport, amassing 76 race wins and tying legends like Richard Petty and Jimmy Johnson with 7 championships. But for many, his greatness wasn't just in stats, it was in his spirit. Earnhardt came from humble beginnings in Kannapolis, North Carolina. Raised in the roar of his father's garage, racing was in his blood. He didn't wear silk, he wore Wrangler jeans and a scowl, and fans didn't just cheer for him, they connected with him. To blue-collar America, Dale Earnhardt was their hero. A man who raced the way they worked, hard, gritty, relentless. He wasn't built for fame, he was built for the fight. He didn't just intimidate competitors, he inspired millions. His iconic black number 3 Goodwrench car became a symbol, not just of NASCAR excellence, but of something deeper: grit, guts, glory. His dedication to winning wasn't just professional, it was personal, and it showed in every turn, every pass, every crash he walked away from. But behind that hard shell there was a mystery, a part of Dale Earnhardt the public never saw. Despite the millions of fans and mountains of media coverage, Dale was intensely private, especially when it came to his personal life. While most drivers embraced the spotlight, Dale built walls, literal ones. Inside the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated DEI facility, there was a door, locked, off limits, and few ever asked what was behind it. That door led to his private garage, a space no fan tour ever entered, no TV camera ever filmed. It was more than just a place to store cars. It was his hideaway, his memory bank, his monument to a life spent in the fast lane. While the public saw Dale as a racer, behind that door was a story few knew. A story that would only be revealed after his tragic death at Daytona in 2001. It was there, years later, when that garage was finally opened, that people realized Dale Earnhardt hadn't just built a racing legacy, he had preserved one. And what was inside would shock everyone, not because of what it was, but because of who it revealed him to be. Years had passed since the racing world lost Dale Earnhardt, but for those closest to him, time hadn't dulled the grief. It had only deepened the mystery. One of the most private parts of Dale's life remained sealed, his personal garage at the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated facility. Tucked behind the main buildings in Mooresville, North Carolina, this space had always been off limits, locked, quiet, untouched since the day he died. When the decision was finally made to open it, emotions ran high. Family members, longtime crew, and trusted friends gathered, unsure what they would find. Some expected chaos, a cluttered collection of forgotten parts and dusty memorabilia. Others thought maybe it was just a storage room, the kind every gearhead has. What they discovered was something else entirely. As the door creaked open and light spilled across the concrete floor, there was a collective pause. It wasn't just a garage, it was something sacred, a personal museum, a memory palace. Everything inside was arranged with care and intention. No dust-covered piles, no random mess. This was a space that had been loved and curated. One wall was lined with race cars. Not replicas, but actual vehicles Dale had driven during iconic moments in NASCAR history. They were parked precisely, many side by side with the trophies they had earned. There were no signs, no labels, no explanations. They didn't need them. The room spoke for itself. Near the entrance stood a gleaming 1957 Chevrolet, cherry red, flawlessly restored. It wasn't part of the NASCAR collection. It was something personal, a car that reminded Dale of where he came from, back when his father, Ralph, worked on. Chevys in their tiny garage in Kannapolis. To most, it was a classic. To Dale, it was a time machine, a link to a simpler time, before the fame and the money, before the Intimidator. This Chevy wasn't tucked in a corner. It was showcased, placed perfectly under soft lights. Around it hung black and white photos of Dale as a young man, working on engines, racing go-karts, laughing with friends. This wasn't a display of wealth. It was a tribute to a childhood that built a champion. Moving further inside, the deeper story unfolded. Rows of helmets, each one marked by track dust and sweat stains. Framed jackets from his early sponsors. Photos never seen by the public. A weathered Wrangler banner from the 1980s. A nod to the brand that believed in him long before anyone else did. One corner held something even more unexpected. A forklift, beat up and covered in Winston Cup stickers. Parked like it belonged. There. It was funny, out of place, and yet perfectly fitting. Former crew members recalled Dale using it regularly and laughing about it. It wasn't for show, it was his, and it said more about his personality than any interview ever could. Then came a quieter moment. At the back of the garage was a door leading to a small room. Inside, visitors found shelves filled with miniature, race cars, tiny jumpsuits, toy trophies, and photos of Dale's grandsons. Jeffrey and Bobby, their faces frozen in time, smiling from behind go-kart wheels. This room wasn't about nostalgia, it was about the future. Dale hadn't just preserved his past, he was planting roots for the next generation. One insider later recalled a comment Dale made years earlier. "I left everything in there. At the time it seemed like a passing remark, but now it felt like a message. That garage wasn't just a room filled with metal and rubber, it was a story that only now the world was beginning to understand." Inside Dale Earnhardt's private garage, the heartbeat of his legacy rumbled quietly through the most powerful artifacts of all, the race cars themselves. Each one was a monument to a moment in time, not repainted, not polished, left exactly as they were the last time Dale climbed out of them. These weren't museum showpieces. They were real, raw, racing scars and all. One of the first that caught everyone's eye was the car, the legendary black number 3 Goodwrench Chevrolet Monte Carlo. It sat proud, still caked with remnants of track grit, the windshield slightly scuffed. A faint crease along the rear panel, the result of a tight pass at Bristol maybe. It didn't matter when. What mattered was the message. This car had raced, it had fought, it had won, and it hadn't been cleaned up to look pretty. It had been preserved to tell the truth. Next to it sat a yellow and blue Wrangler jeans car, a throwback to Dale's early days. The livery was worn, the sponsor stickers faded. This was the vehicle that first made NASCAR fans take notice of the rough-edged, fearless kid from Kannapolis. You could almost smell the dust of the 1980s short tracks lingering in the air. Each car had a story. Each imperfection was a paragraph in a chapter of racing history. No two were the same, but every one of them whispered the same thing. This man lived the sport. Tucked deeper into the lineup was a car from his Richard Childress racing era, one of the 7 that carried him to a championship. The tires were still mounted, the race number still painted on with the kind of defiant confidence only a team like theirs could conjure. Nothing was replaced, nothing retouched. They were frozen in time, not to be admired but to be felt. Visitors who walked the lineup said it felt like walking into a ghost story. Only the ghosts weren't gone. They were sitting right there, in sheet metal and rubber, waiting for someone to hear them. One car had a cracked windshield, a souvenir from a particularly hard-fought race on a dirt oval. Another had a front bumper barely hanging on. It had clearly taken a hit, but none of it was fixed. Because Dale never wanted these cars to be perfect. He wanted them to be real. Most drivers never get to keep their race cars. They're repurposed, sold, scrapped, forgotten. But Dale Earnhardt had held on to them, quietly acquiring them over the years. He knew what they meant. He knew someday they'd matter more than anyone realized. And he was right. For NASCAR insiders, invited to see, the garage, the impact was immediate. These weren't props, they were testaments. Proof of everything Dale had given to the sport, and everything the sport had taken from him. What stunned everyone wasn't just the scale of the collection. It was the precision, the intentionality. Dale didn't do anything halfway. These cars weren't parked. They were placed, each one telling its own story while contributing to a greater narrative, that of a man who knew his life meant something and wanted to make sure it was never misunderstood. He didn't keep these, Cars because they were valuable. He kept them because they were personal. Each one a marker of a milestone, a memory, a moment of glory or pain. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was about truth. And in a world full of curated image and carefully edited history, Dale Earnhardt's garage offered something rare: authenticity. If the race cars in Dale Earnhardt's garage told the story of how he lived on the track, the trophies told the story of what he achieved there and what it cost him. Lined along the walls on shelves, and even resting on the hoods of the very cars that earned them, the trophies weren't displayed like museum artifacts. They weren't polished to a blinding shine or locked behind glass. They were out in the open, visible, touchable, real. Each one was placed with intent. There were the big ones, of course, the gleaming awards from Daytona, Darlington, Talladega, the holy trinity of Earnhardt dominance. There were trophies from his 7 Winston Cup championships grouped in a corner like battle flags. But nestled among those giants were smaller, more personal symbols. A rusted plaque from a dirt track win in his early 20s, a thank you award from a local sponsor he never forgot. None of them were arranged by size or value. They were arranged by story. What struck visitors the most wasn't the number of trophies. It was how they were treated. Many had smudges, a few had dents. One had a crooked brass nameplate and a scratch down the side. And yet there was no sign of neglect. Only authenticity. Because Dale didn't keep these trophies to impress anyone. He kept them to remember. Behind one race-worn Monte Carlo was a wood-based trophy with a note taped to its side. It read simply, "Still worth it." No one could say for sure who wrote it. Maybe Dale, maybe someone else. But its message rang clear. This wasn't about vanity. It was about validation. Every trophy had a story, and some of them were painful. To outsiders, a dented trophy might just look like damaged goods. But to Dale, it probably carried more meaning than the ones that shined. Maybe it was from a race where he overcame impossible odds, or one where he walked away with bruises, but still crossed the finish line. This was Dale Earnhardt's way. He didn't wrap his accomplishments in velvet ropes. He didn't sanitize the mess. He let the story stand on its own, grit and all. Even in the way he displayed his victories, Dale was telling us something. The journey mattered just as much as the win, maybe even more. That's what shocked so many who walked through the garage. They didn't see arrogance or ego, they saw humility. A man who didn't need trophies to feel like a champion, but kept them as a reminder of everything it took to become one. And for those who looked closely, the message was always the same. Victory isn't just about what you take home, it's about what you leave behind. For all its reverence and racing history, Dale Earnhardt's garage also had a side that caught everyone off guard. A side that reminded visitors that even the most serious legends have their quirks. Tucked between the championship cars and the dusty trophies were items that didn't quite belong, or at least not in the way you'd expect. And yet these oddities told their own story. Perhaps the most talked about piece was a forklift. Not a custom-built one, not even a clean one, just a standard beat-up forklift covered in Winston Cup stickers. It sat awkwardly between 2 race cars looking completely out of place, until you realized it was exactly where Dale wanted it. The crew who worked at the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated facility said he used that forklift regularly to move gear, load equipment, even goof off when no one was watching. The stickers weren't random. They were applied with intention, like racing stripes on a machine that would never race. It became an inside joke, a running gag, a reminder that even the intimidator didn't take himself too seriously all the time. Then there was the recliner, a cracked brown leather chair facing an old television, the kind with dials. The TV was permanently tuned to race replays, most of them Earnhardt's own. Some thought it was for nostalgia. Others said he just liked to analyze his performances. Either way, it was personal, it was lived in. Not decor, his spot. One wall held a surprise for longtime fans, a massive, weather-beaten Wrangler billboard. Dale had salvaged it from a racetrack that had long since been shut down. The sign wasn't pretty. It was sun-faded, bent in a few places, and leaned against the wall like a forgotten painting. But to Dale, it was a reminder. Wrangler was one of his first big sponsors. One of the first companies that truly believed in him before the fame and titles. That billboard wasn't there because it looked good. It was there because it meant something. And then there were the little things. A vending machine stocked with unopened sodas from the 90s. A pair of dusty racing boots mounted like trophies on the wall. A cracked helmet signed by multiple drivers, some of whom had once been fierce rivals. These weren't pieces for a gallery. They were parts of a life. Visitors expecting a pristine, curated Hall of Fame were met with something else entirely. A garage with humor, with warmth, and with a kind of controlled chaos. Just like the man who owned it. In an era where everything is staged for cameras and social media, this garage stood apart. It wasn't designed to impress. It wasn't meant to be seen at all. And maybe that's why it felt so powerful. Because in the end, the quirks, the oddities, and the random objects were just as important as the race cars and trophies. They were reminders that Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a champion. He was a person. Behind the horsepower, the trophies, and the relics of NASCAR greatness, there was one part of Dale Earnhardt's garage that revealed the core of who he really was. A quiet room, almost hidden, entirely dedicated to family. It wasn't marked. It didn't announce itself with flashing lights or sponsor logos, but to those who stepped inside, it instantly felt different. The energy softened. The purpose shifted. This room was for his grandsons. Tiny race suits hung on child-sized pegs. Shelves held miniature die-cast cars, many of them replicas of Dale's own. There were small trophies, hand-signed photographs, and candid pictures of Jeffrey and Bobby Earnhardt behind the wheels of go-karts, laughing, concentrating, dreaming. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a blueprint. Everything in this space suggested preparation, not just remembrance. Dale wasn't only looking back at where he'd come from, he was looking forward, laying the groundwork for where his family might go next. Jeffrey and Bobby were just kids when their grandfather passed in 2001. Today, both have carved out names in professional racing. And now it's clear, they were never just following his footsteps. They were walking a path he had carefully cleared for them. This small, quiet room held no engines, no finish lines, but it held purpose, deep, deliberate purpose. It told a side of Dale Earnhardt that few fans ever saw. The man who wasn't just building a legacy for himself, but a foundation for those who would come after him. He didn't leave behind just race cars and trophies. He left behind a future. After Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001, the private world he left behind stunned even those who thought they knew him best. But perhaps even more powerful than what was discovered is what happened next. His garage didn't disappear into memory. It evolved into something larger. Today, pieces of that legendary collection are preserved and displayed across North Carolina, not behind velvet ropes, but in places that reflect Dale's raw, authentic legacy. At the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, DEI facility in Mooresville, visitors can walk through curated exhibits featuring the very race cars he once drove, the gear he wore, and yes, some of the original trophies he left exactly as they were. It's a living time capsule, still humble, still real. In his hometown of Kannapolis, the Dale Earnhardt Tribute Center focuses on something more personal, the man behind the helmet. Through photos, memorabilia, and hometown stories, fans meet Dale, not just as a racer, but as a father, mentor, and hero of the people. Then there's the Richard Childress Racing Museum, home to the greatest collection of Earnhardt's competition vehicles. These aren't touched up or sterilized. They're kept as they were, a little dusty, slightly bruised, but full of soul. Fans say it's like standing inside a moment of racing history. Together, these places keep the spirit of Dale Earnhardt alive. Not as a frozen statue, but as a legacy in motion. Every year, thousands come to pay tribute. Some bring their kids, others wear old Wrangler jackets. They all come for the same reason: to remember a man who never raced for fame, but raced for something bigger. And thanks to what he left behind, his story is still roaring down the track. Dale Earnhardt's garage wasn't just a storage space. It was a story, carefully written in grease, grit, and love. It told us more than any stat sheet ever could. It showed us the battles, the pride, the humor, and the heart of a man who lived not just to win, but to matter. Behind the intimidating persona was someone who deeply valued legacy, family, and the truth of where he came from. And maybe that's the most powerful part of what he left behind. It wasn't built to impress, it was built to last. So here's a question for you. If someone walked into your space after you were gone, what would they learn about you? Would they see ambition, humor, love, legacy? Dale didn't need to speak those words. He left them in steel and rubber, trophies and toys, dust and memory. His garage wasn't a goodbye, it was a message. Thanks for joining us in discovering the side of Dale Earnhardt few ever got to see. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see the legend in a new light, hit that like button. Share this video and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter. We'll see you in the next one.